All right, we will go on the record. The time is 6 p.m. and this is the hearing for Deschutes County file number 247-23470-TA, which is a request by the City of Bend seeking a text amendment to the Deschutes County Code. My name is Tommy Brooks and I am the hearings officer in this matter. Before we turn to the particulars of tonight's hearing, I'm going to turn things over to Ms. Stewart to describe how the electronic process works.
Good evening. For the record, my name's Audrey Stewart, and I'm an associate planner with the Deschutes County Planning Division. The item before the hearings officer is a text amendment to allow an air traffic control tower as a new use within the airport development zone and increase the allowed height to 115 feet. Today's hearing will proceed as follows. First, staff will explain the hearing format and how to testify at today's hearing. This will be followed by a brief presentation on the application. The county has established the following time limits for testimony: 30 minutes for the applicant, 10 minutes for any public agencies, 3 minutes for the general public, and 10 minutes for the applicant's rebuttal. However, the hearings officer can modify or eliminate these as they see fit. When the testimony portion of the hearing begins, the applicant will present first, followed by agencies, followed by those in support, and then those in opposition. And last, those who are neutral to the applicant's request will testify. Afterwards, the applicant will be afforded an opportunity to present rebuttal testimony, and then finally, staff will make any closing comments. This is a hybrid public hearing with both in-person and remote participation. Before starting your testimony, please provide your first and last name as well as your mailing address. For our in-person participants, if you wish to testify, please add your name to the sign-in sheet. I will use this list to call up participants for their testimony. After your name is called, please come up to one of the tables here at the front before beginning your testimony. For our remote participants, if you want to testify, you must be logged into Zoom or have called in using the Zoom dial-in option. When hearings officer Brooks asks if anyone attending remotely would like to testify, you will need to use the raise hand feature to notify staff. To do this, you need to press the raise hand button on your computer, smart device, or if you've called in, dial *9. In addition to oral testimony, if anyone has written testimony to submit, please hand it to me. If you're in person, please submit your written testimony to me after your oral testimony. If you're participating remotely, you can submit your written testimony to me, and my email address is on the screen, audrey.stewart@deschutes.org. Hearings officer Brooks and staff are responsible for conducting an orderly hearing. Any testimony or behavior which is inappropriate will be addressed and may result in that member of the public being removed from the hearing. Are there any objections to the format of the hearing? If you are attending remotely and have an objection, please use the raise hand function. Seeing none in the room and none on Zoom, I will turn the hearings over to hearings officer Brooks.
All right, thank you, Ms. Stewart. And as just described, we are following the hearing procedures that are set forth in the county's code, and I will provide sufficient opportunity for everyone to participate at the appropriate time. This application is being considered in part through a quasi-judicial process. I will consider only the factual evidence that is in the record and will then apply those facts to any relevant provisions of the county's comprehensive plan and land use regulations. The hearings officer's role in this particular proceeding is to ensure that the county's process is followed and to make a recommendation to the county's Board of Commissioners regarding the proposed text amendments. The standards and applicable criteria relevant to this hearing and my recommendation were identified, or the standards and applicable criteria that are relevant to my recommendation are identified in the public notice announcing this hearing. They're also set forth in the staff report. The public notice and the staff report are posted on the county's website, and they're also available directly from staff upon request. I'll reiterate that it's important that you direct all your testimony to the standards and applicable criteria. And if you believe a criterion applies that was not listed, you may address the unlisted criterion. However, I urge you to also explain why the criterion must apply and to do so with specificity so that any other participants may respond and so that I can address that issue in my recommendation. The failure to raise an issue with enough detail that enables me or other participants to respond may preclude your ability to appeal that issue to the Land Use Board of Appeals. Also, the failure to raise a constitutional or other issue relating to any proposed conditions of approval, again, with enough detail that allows me to respond to that issue in my recommendation, precludes an action for damages in circuit court. As I've noted, I serve as the county's hearings officer in this matter, and in that role, my job is to be a neutral decision maker. Thus, while I have a contract with the county to serve in this role, I'm obligated to remain impartial, and I do not represent the county's interests or the interests of any other participant. To that end, I'll state for the record that I am not aware of any connections I may have to participants in this proceeding that would prevent me from remaining impartial. I have communicated with staff, but only to discuss the particulars of today's hearing and not the substance of the application. I do not have any ex parte contacts to disclose. So at this point, I want to determine how many people are actually signed up to testify, if that's possible.
We have one person in person who's signed up to testify. And I don't believe we've had anyone over Zoom who's raised their hand. No.
All right. It should be pretty straightforward. I think as we get to the testimony, I will, I don't know that we need to diligently enforce the time limits, but we may. So before we begin, does anyone wish to challenge my ability to hear this matter or to challenge the county's jurisdiction over the matter?
There are no hands raised in the room or over Zoom.
All right, thank you. So with that, we will turn it back over to you, Ms. Stewart, to deliver the staff report.
Thank you. Before we go into public testimony, I'll provide some background on the subject application. The applicant has requested to add a new use within the airport development zone. The airport development zone encompasses one airport in Deschutes County, which is the Bend Municipal Airport, located just to the northeast of Bend. The AD zone covers 340 acres and includes 3 zoning districts, which is the Airfield Operations District, the Aviation Support District, and the Aviation-Related Industrial District. The applicant proposes amendments to the Airport Development Zone and the Airport Safety Combining Zone. The effect of these amendments is to add a new definition for an air traffic control tower, allow an air traffic control tower as a use permitted outright in the Airport Development Zone, and allow an air traffic control tower to be up to 115 feet in height without requiring a variance. Staff and the applicant worked together to revise the proposed code language and ensure that it would function correctly. And this proposed code language is included as an attachment to the staff report. One public comment was received yesterday, October 1st, and all materials received as of 5 p.m. today have been uploaded to the record. Staff notes I did receive additional emails at 5:30 today that haven't been uploaded to the record. In addition to Deschutes County Code, airport uses are also regulated by the Oregon Department of Aviation and the FAA. Oregon Department of Aviation submitted comments indicating they didn't have concerns with the proposal, and the applicant has demonstrated that they've coordinated with the FAA. The applicant will provide more detail on this, but the reason for the text amendment is that Bend Municipal Airport was selected as a candidate by the FAA for the Federal Contract Tower Program. Staff also received comments from the Deschutes County Transportation Planner, who indicated that this proposal complies with the transportation planning rule. This text amendment is being reviewed through a quasi-judicial process, and final action must come from the Board of County Commissioners. As outlined in the staff report, this application qualifies as a quasi-judicial text amendment, but also carries properties of a legislative amendment. A public hearing is being held before a hearings officer who will issue their recommendation, and then final action needs to be taken by the Board of County Commissioners, since only they have the authority to modify Deschutes County Code. All of the comments and materials are available in the public record, which is the link shown on the slide here. And with that, staff is available for any questions from the hearings officer.
I think I just have one procedural question for you, Ms. Stewart. I don't obviously have yet the comments that were submitted late at 5:30. Were those generic comments, or they take a particular position or raise any issues?
They were generally in opposition. They were by Doreen Tai, who submitted a comment yesterday, October 1st, and there were a number of attachments, so I haven't looked through it all yet.
Okay, thank you. That's the only question I have for you. So we can have the applicant come up next. Ready when you are.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Brooks, county staff, and other members of the public who are interested in the matter before you tonight. I'm Tracy Williams, the Bend Municipal Airport Manager, and have been for about 3.5 years. I am joined by my co-presenter, Matt Rogers, who is a consultant for the Bend Airport and has been for about the last 15 years. So he has been with this proposal since at least 2008. Over the next several slides, I think I have 8, I and Matt will be reviewing what is the Bend Airport, what is the economic impact of the Bend Airport on the region, along with how we got here to pursuing an air traffic control tower at the Bend Municipal Airport. And then finally, we'll spend some time on what is our ask and what will it mean. So with that, thank you. Oh. So with that, the city of Bend is seeking a text amendment to allow the construction of an air traffic control tower at the Bend Municipal Airport. And Matt will expand further on that. Airport statistics. I thought I would provide just a brief overview on what the Bend Airport level of activity is and how it locally and how it fits within the region. So in terms of our local setting, the Bend Municipal Airport is 420 acres. We have one single runway and a significant helicopter operating area. Of the top 5 busiest airports in Oregon, that includes takeoff and landings, as well as based aircraft, Bend is within the top 3. In terms of operations, which are takeoffs and landings, Bend has approximately 141,000 annual operations. That averages out to about 680 takeoff and landings per day. There are nearly 300 based aircraft that include helicopters, jets, single engine, ultralights, and home builds. So it's pretty diverse and busy. Those statistics are fairly current and come largely from the FAA database. The impacts of the airport on the region includes direct, indirect, and induced. Induced is the multiplier effect, which means 860 jobs, one of which a major employer is Epic Aircraft. They design, construct, build, and train for the aircraft that they build. And that's about half of our employees. $166 million annually in sales and output, meaning when money changes hands. $32 million in payroll. My salary is minimal on that. $6 million annually in general aviation visitor spending. Bend Municipal Airport is, by state of Oregon definition, a level 2 high activity business and general aviation airport. So general aviation spending is when an individual or company flies into the Bend Airport, stays at local hotels, dines at Bend area restaurants, and enjoys all of the beautiful attractions that Central Oregon has. As you know, Bend is a destination. There's also at least $4 million in construction and sales output. The most significant construction occurred in about 2016, and that was the rehabilitation of the West Ramp and the creation of the helicopter operations area. The data that I am including here comes from an Oregon Department of Aviation study, and that was largely based on activity from between 2014 and 2016. So it's a little dated. However, there has been significant construction on the airport in recent years. And last year, we completed a $1.6 million runway and lighting rehabilitation project. And in the last couple of years, roughly 20 to 30 brand new hangars have been built by private sector. So at this point, I will turn it over to Matt to address the next several slides.
Thanks, Tracy. So just talking about the air traffic control tower project, there are three main components of the project. The air traffic control tower structure, approximately 115 feet tall, including a rotating beacon, antennas, and lightning rods, an access road, parking area, utility connections, and security fencing around the perimeter of the air traffic control tower area. And then a little bit further north on the site is another small red box in this figure. That's a supplemental weather sensor. And the text amendment is needed primarily for the height of the air traffic control tower at 115 feet. If we go to the next slide, shows the timeline of the air traffic control tower need and process at the Bend Municipal Airport. It was initially contemplated in around 2008 with the first siting study for a control tower. It was further studied in two airport master plans, one in 2012, one in 2022, and then recently studied in an environmental assessment in 2023. It should be noted that public involvement opportunities were available in both master plan projects and the environmental assessment. The desired improvement, the air traffic control tower through the master plan process was identified as the #1 desired improvement on the airfield by airport users. It is also supported by a host of agencies, including the FAA, various lines of business, including the Seattle Airports District Office, Flight Standards, Seattle Air Traffic Control, It's supported by the Oregon Department of Aviation, Redmond Airport staff and air traffic control personnel, Bend Airport users, and it was supported by the Planning Advisory Committee for the 2022 Airport Master Plan. In addition, there were 18 letters of support for the air traffic control tower, including Central Oregon Community College, EDCO, and airport businesses. In terms of need, the city, in conjunction with the FAA, went through a siting evaluation process that considered a number of candidate sites and focused on the subject site evaluated in the environmental assessment. The siting evaluation process identified the height of the tower required to provide visual observation of the airfield. And based on that, it is estimated that the air traffic control tower will be up to 115 feet tall. Current airport zoning limits building height to 35 feet. This text amendment will modify the code to allow for the construction of the tower to a height of 115 feet.
Thank you, Matt. And this concludes the portion of our presentation to the county hearing officer, staff, and the information we'd like to share with the interested parties. If there is a need for accommodation for people with disabilities, my contact information is on the screen now. And with that, we want to thank you for your time, your attention, and careful consideration of our request, and are prepared to respond to questions, comments, or concerns at the appropriate time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I would like to take this time to ask you some questions now while you're both up here. And you can, I don't know if I'm going to direct it to either one of you in particular, so feel free to jump in. I think, you know, this is kind of a outside of a normal process where my role here is ultimately to make a recommendation to the county board. So these questions are really me making sure I understand what the intent of the proposal is, so that I can reflect that and ultimately in the recommendation. So one question I have is, I understand the need to do the text amendments from the height standpoint because the 35 feet is a major limitation. But just more fundamentally, it seems like the code already allows, as an outright permitted use, customary and usual aviation related activities, and that an air traffic control tower is pretty customary and usual in aviation. So I'm just curious if there's something you can offer me about sort of why the need to call out that particular part of the airport in the code, as opposed to leaving it as part of the generic what's allowed already.
I think based on discussions with county staff going into this process, it was not clear if this fit within the guidelines of customary and usual, because it is a somewhat unique facility. And so that is my understanding of why the text amendment was desired.
Okay. Perfectly fair explanation. I want to get at the actual text amendments themselves. And again, as I proceed with the recommendation, I just want to make sure it's drafted in the right way. So I'm going to ask some questions, and I guess you can tell me if if I propose something that would change the intent of your proposal. But just and some of these are pretty straightforward. In 18.76.015, which is the definitions in the county's code, is where you've initially added the air traffic control tower as a new defined term. I note that the rest of those terms are in alphabetical order and this is tacked on at the end. So if my recommendation moved that up alphabetically for the code, would that be an issue?
I would see no issue with that.
Okay. The second one is on 18.76.030. This is where you've added the air traffic control tower as a outright permitted use. One thing that I think the application does is make it very clear that you, or at least are, I think, trying to justify a single tower. Because the transportation impact analysis, for example, looked at the impact of the use of that one tower and the number of trips that would cause. I don't see any other real limit in the code that would make this only one tower possible. So I wonder if it would be appropriate in that section G, instead of just saying an air traffic control tower, which is ambiguous and could be one or multiple, if you kept doing that just to say something like a single air traffic control tower, something that just aligns it more to your proposal.
Yeah, I think that would be fine. And if any city staff have any objection to that,
At this time, it's reasonable to assume only one air traffic control tower on our 420 acres is appropriate. If this were O'Hare in Chicago or Los Angeles that has several thousand acres needed for visibility, as well as for segments of their airport that may be unseen, then that would be appropriate. If the city were to acquire 3,000 more acres, it might be appropriate at that time based on our terminal area forecast and our most recently approved airport master plan. That is not in the forecast for at least 30 to 50 years.
Right. Thank you. And again, my intent is not to change your proposal or do anything different. I just want to make sure that whatever I'm recommending to the board aligns with what I think is being proposed. So that's one thing I've been considering. Another one, and these are, and I admit these are a little, these are fine hairs that I'm doing. I just want to make sure it all lines up. And the other one is in 18.76.050, where you've added the new, I guess, the height limitation. As a hearings officer, I like to read codes and have them make sense. And so I don't like having a 1 without a 2, for example. So you have A1 there. I don't know that exists other places in the code. I'm still kind of looking, but it makes sense to me that it could be a standalone provision that section A can be the height of everything other than an air traffic control tower. And then this new one could just be a new B that says that the air traffic control towers shall not exceed 115 feet. So again, if that's going to change your proposal, I don't want to do it, but if that's something you could live with, I would like to consider that as part of my consideration of the recommendation.
That's acceptable and will not change our ask.
All right, thank you. And then the last one, this one may be a little bit harder. And I want to look at 18.80.044. And this is the portion of the code that relates to land use compatibility. And at the end of that section there's a new sentence that says an air traffic control tower is not subject to this section. That was the only text, the proposed text, that I didn't see an explanation for in the application, and maybe I just missed it. But I didn't, I noted in the application, it says the application is not going to allow incompatible land uses, but on the land use compatibility section, we're now saying it doesn't apply to air traffic control tower. So I kind of need some explanation for the purpose of that addition.
And if it's okay with the applicant, I can jump in for this one.
sure.
So this section was added to make it clear that, so 18.80.044 does not apply to an air traffic control tower. The intent of this is sort of to remove any ambiguity. It wasn't, I guess, readily apparent to staff reading through this if an air traffic control tower was proposed and permitted outright, if there would later be some sort of interpretive question about whether it was subject to this section, and if so, whether it could meet that section, and if so, what the review process would be if there wasn't an associated land use application.
All right, great. Thank you very much for that clarification. I think that is all the questions I have for the applicant. Ms. Stewart, has anyone else signed up to testify?
We have one person in person who's in opposition, and I don't believe there's anyone over Zoom who wishes to testify.
Okay, so
Thank you again for your time and attention.
Oh, yes, of course. And the applicant will be allowed to come back up for rebuttal if necessary after this testimony.
And with that, would you like to move into the public testimony section? And
Yeah, sorry, that wasn't clear. Yeah, no one else has signed up. Let's get to the one person who has.
We have Doreen Ty signed up.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak and be here. And for accepting my last minute documents I said would be coming. It was going to be one. I couldn't get my PDF to work with me, so it turned into a lot. You asked some really good questions. Why is there a hearing on the tower? Why is there, when there was no hearing on the master plans? And when was the last master plan that was approved? 2002, 2003, urban renewal in 2005. The 2013 was only approved on a small portion, but then turned around and pushed through, sandwiched between wildlife inventory and something else, read off by text amendment only in 2021, November of 2021. Turn around a year later, or a few months later, and adopt the next one, which isn't dated. Is that 19 or 20? So yeah, it's really confusing that we're having a hearing on a tower and we're not having a hearing on master plans that were hotly contested and parts of them rejected, and then they were just turned around and adopted. So that, I think that's a wonderful question on why are we having a hearing if it's just a tower? And land use compatibility has never been something that seems to interfere with airport activity. We are a sacrifice community near the airport, and our lives have been turned into a living hell and targeted by pilots who are angry that we have reported them for being asses. So sorry, I have no better, that's a kind term for what they do to us. Oregon's land use and hearing process is supposed to represent the people of Oregon and the citizens impacted by changes in our community. There is more to successful communities than the amount of federal money an elected body can get into our communities, especially when that money is put into aviation, which destroys our farms, our rural lands, and the essence of Central Oregon, which is sought out for its cleaner, quieter way of life. There should be no further advancement of airport amenities, tower, pavement, or any agenda which changes code uses and land use changes. We must have a cumulative impact analysis of Bend Municipal Airport operational and functionality increases. And we really need an audit. One of my documents I submitted was, I want to say 37 line items that cover 6 years of operational totals. And there are numerous totals with up to 88% variance per year. And the numbers change conveniently per master plan or what they're talking about. I'm seeing the same thing with the money. I'm seeing the same thing with land use compatibility. So we really need an audit and a cumulative impact before one more thing is approved for Bend Municipal Airport. And we need the citizens of our community to be looked out for by this hearings officer and this hearings body and by our commissioners, where we have a commissioner who sits on one of the airport advisory boards. And I encourage you to really look through my documents. I spent a lot of time pulling reference, some that are missing where I'm trying to prove, hey, this is what happened with this adoption of a master plan. Documents change every time I post them online. Hey, go read the master plan. The link breaks and it's moved. So there needs to be some transparency, some appropriate public inclusion, some appropriate public awareness and involvement. And there's nobody that sits on the community, for the community, on any of the advisory boards. We're not represented. So that is, I think, the sum total. I mean, I really gave you a lot of data with a lot of backup. It might, what Audrey will post, or I can compile and post. We'll at least get it to you in a smaller file. The procedural issues, I think, have been really missed in public involvement too. So let's see, was that it? Thank you for extra time, because I have been meeting with several members in the community. So I'm not sitting here just as me. There are several people behind me. They don't want their names on documents because of the retaliation. And I have submitted within this a petition of 25 signatures of what that backs up what I'm saying. Please don't go forward. They're in opposition. I have provided some really good comments from community members. I've just removed their names. So, and that people are hiding from a public forum says a lot about how the community here has been treated as a sacrifice zone. And we really need some representation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. I don't have any questions for you, but I will be able to read the materials you provided before I make a recommendation. And then, Ms. Stewart, just to confirm, there are still no others that have signed up for testimony.
Correct. There's no one else in the room. And just to double check, it looks like no one has their hand raised on Zoom.
Okay. So if the applicant would like to come back up for rebuttal, it is welcome to do so.
Thank you for the opportunity to provide further comment. I will defer largely to Matt, but what I can say, in the 3.5 years that I've been employed with the city and associated with all planning and development and construction of the airport, the previous airport master plan in 2013 was approved by FAA, did not go before any land use hearings. Since then, we have submitted text amendments based on projects as opposed to the airport master plan in its entirety. That is largely because some of the development proposals or projects identified as desired have a requirement for an environmental assessment. Environmental assessments generally have a shelf life. So we are presenting text amendment request based on a project that we believe is doable in a relatively short term.
Yeah, and I would just like to say that we understand there's a number of comments that Ms. Ty has brought forward. We would request that the record remain open so that we can go through those thoroughly and provide a response to each of the comments, so that we're not shooting from the cuff here, but actually considering the comments and responding.
Okay. All right. Is that it for the applicant?
Yes, at this
Okay.
time.
Thank you very much. I don't have any follow-up questions for you right now. Ms. Stewart, does staff have anything it would like to add? Or should we just talk about procedure?
No comments to add. Staff is amenable to all the suggested edits and can work with the applicant to get those added to the record.
Okay, thank you. Well, with that, the applicant has requested to leave the record open so that it can respond to and I guess review and respond to the late filed comments. So I'm inclined to do that. And typically our process would be to do sort of a 777 process, which Ms. Stewart's put up here. So I'll let her go over the specific deadlines, but just substantively, I will leave the written record open only for new evidence and testimony for 7 days, a rebuttal period for 7 days following that, any participant can rebut the new evidence and testimony, and then a final 7-day period for the applicant only to make a legal argument if it desires. That legal argument would not should not include any new evidence, just argument. So I think with that, Ms. Stewart, you probably have some more specific instructions for the participants.
Correct. And before I go into some specifics of the open record period, does the applicant agree to the 777 open record period? Okay. So for the open record period, please keep in mind all submittals should be addressed to me. For email submittals, use my email address, audrey.stewart@deschutes.org. The county does not retrieve information from a website link or personal cloud storage device. It is your responsibility to submit all evidence and testimony you want the hearings officer to consider. Any electronic submittals must be received by the county server by 4 p.m. Please do not wait until the last minute to submit your evidence and testimony. And once again, here are those deadlines. The open record period ends at 4 p.m. on Monday, October 9th. The rebuttal period ends at 4 p.m. on Monday, October 16th. And the applicant's final legal argument period ends at 4 p.m. on Monday, October 23rd. And with that, staff will turn it back over to the hearings officer.
All right, thank you. That concludes the proceedings for tonight, and the written record is going to be left open as we've described it here. And if anyone has questions about that, they should follow up with staff. Otherwise, we will go ahead and go off the record. It is 6:41. Thank you.